All right, so let's take a look at what makes this scene work. Obviously, you can move these rocks around, and the whole point of this is to get them into the right order, which you don't really know what the order is, but hey, it's or what it should be, I suppose. It's just an example, and of course, you can do all sorts of fun things with this that don't involve a specific order anyway. You just kind of putting some rocks around. Maybe it could be a terrarium or something like that a kid gets to play with, and they have their own virtual pet. Who knows? So here we go. We have in the scene quite a few elements out here already. What I'll do is I'll show you how you could potentially add in a new one. Just go over here and give it a name. Let's call it Rock 1, which we actually already have a name for that over here, but it's all right. And set the texture, and then over custom class, put in here element, and you are ready to interact with that particular item via the property list. So what we've already got in here are rock 1, rock 2, rock 3 over there, rock 4, and we've got a rock bottom, and then we've got some background elements like the ocean background, our blurry landscape. We've even got another kind of fade over here that if I were to move that, you'll see what it looks like. So it's just gives a little bit more realism, like those rocks are kind of immersed into the water. And all these background elements do not have physics bodies to them, but all the foreground elements do. And you can actually get a sense for that just by looking at it. See that little blue line outlining this? You can kind of see it over here too. It's hard to see it on the actual blue background, of course. So if you were to come down over to our physics definition, we have this set to alpha mask, and by default I've turned off dynamic and I've turned off affected by gravity, and I'm just allowing for rotation initially, which, come to think of it, that doesn't matter. So the reason I've done that, and I don't know if this is going to be an issue that gets solved later on down the road, but it seems like the physics bodies initially end up kind of like just leaving the scene almost right away when you have dynamic and you have affected by gravity on, and you have nothing underneath to stop them from falling. Now, code-wise in the kit, we actually end up creating an edge-based boundary around these objects right away, but I guess it's not in time to prevent them from escaping. So what I've done is I've set their dynamic and their affected by gravity properties off altogether, and I've just kind of arranged them where I want them to be, which actually does kind of make a little bit more sense anyway. So but then what happens code property list wise is when you pick up one of these objects and then you let go of it, then we turn our dynamic property back on and we turn our affected by gravity property back on. And gravity is an obvious one, but dynamic just means that basically it can take part in the physics simulation in the scene. So for example, another rock could knock into a dynamic set physics body, and it's going to move that body around. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything else we need to talk about inside of here. We could detect particular physics collisions between these objects, but we're just not doing that in this particular scene. All we're worrying about is arranging them. So let's go and take a look at our elements. So there's not many of them. The ocean background, it does have a touch event where we are panning all of these objects inside of here when we move around. Okay, so that's what sets up the pan, and the panning is also removed when we grab our rocks. So doing this with the ocean background is just kind of a catch-all, just in case there was ever an issue where, I don't know, that didn't work. The panning is going to be reset anytime you touch that background. So you can see that we're actually including all of our objects inside of here. And we are also using a stick node-to-node dictionary, which sets in some of the parallax effects. So, for example, the blurry landscape in the background is stuck to the rock bottom. which that one that actually has a physics body that you're arranging the rocks on, but it has a parallax effect set to it so that the blurry landscape is always going to be at basically half or 50% of the X value of that rock bottom. So when you move them back and forth, when you pan it back and forth, you're actually moving the rock bottom, and then that's adjusting the parallax effect. And if you watch the setup guide for the previous puzzle, this one over here, we were just moving the camera around because there wasn't going to be any sort of parallax effects in there. So keep that in mind. And and of course you could actually stick another node to the camera as well and have that its parallax effects being there. But I don't know, I just went with moving everything this time around, just in some sense to show you could do it. And then there's some other nodes that are sticking to each other. For example, the fade is sticking to the blurry landscape, but in this case there's no parallax effect, and we're just using the current offset. So basically, however they're arranged in the scene, they're just going to be kind of stuck to each other like that as they are. And I've also got in here a light node that is stuck to the camera. So wherever the camera goes, the light is going to go with it. And again, we're using that current offset. So whatever the difference is between them currently, they're going to be stuck together at that same difference. And then let's take a look at our rocks, and we'll talk about how they're pairing together momentarily. So we've got we're removing the pan anytime you touch down on a rock. Okay, so that pan gesture is not going to it's not interfering with moving our rocks around. This element is going to start following the touch. Physics are stopped on it. Dynamic is off, which I talked about earlier. Gravity is off. And then when we touch up, or basically when the user leaves their finger touching the screen, dynamic is going to be back on for that item. Gravity is going to be back on. Stop all following touch. It basically means that any other object that was following the user's touch, which there really shouldn't be any, they're going to stop. And then we're also going to add back the panning gesture. So, and of course, you can copy all of these as one giant unit and paste them into other properties. But in this case, for all of these rocks, I just got one of them set up, and then all I did was I just copy and pasted and then just changed, so if I wanted rock 5, I'd put in there rock 5. And the nice thing about these touch events is that, I could have specified in here another object, but when I leave this blank, when it is a touch event, it's just going to apply to this particular element. So you don't actually have to go through here and kind of like list out specific elements that are going to get moved around. Although, you could do this if you wanted. You could put in here rock 5, or actually you wouldn't do that, but you could say rock 5, rock 5, rock 5. But, it's just referring back to itself right here. So it's you wouldn't need to do that. All right, so let's take a look at the pairing. And here we go. We've got our, let's see. We've got placeholders for where the bases are going to get moved to here. And let me actually hide some of these other ones. So that is already hidden. Okay, well, clearly it's not hiding that stuff too. Okay, here's our rock base 4. So this rock right here is going to pair with this guy, and this does actually have to be a color sprite. Although you can see obviously it's got no alpha value to it. I could show it to you like this. I could kick the alpha back on a little bit, and you would just see like a red square. See that? But essentially, it's just being used as this invisible area that we're just going to try to get our rock onto. Okay, now when enough of the frame has been detected colliding with the center point of that, the two have paired together like a puzzle, and we're going to do specific things to the rock. Basically, we're going to rotate it back to 0. We're going to remove its the option to touch down on it and move it around again. So there's a bunch of things that happen to it, but we are going to actually leave the physics body on there so we can still stack other rocks on top of it. And that is a property that I'll show you in just a moment. Now, I don't want you to be able to pair these other rocks with these other potential bases to go to. So their actual like rock bases are above They're somewhere over here. I can't see them. There they are. Rock base 3, 2, 1. They're just kind of floating above the scene. So what happens is when we actually pair this rock 4, to its base, there's an event that occurs where it then takes rock base 3 and it moves it to rock placeholder 3. And then we're able to pair our rock 3 to that area over there. So basically, as long as, I should probably even consider moving these further up. So there's no chance that you could move this rock over to the very top there. So then again, same thing happens if you pair then rock 3 base to rock 3, then the event makes it so that rock placeholder 2, or actually I should say rock base 2 goes to rock placeholder 2, and these guys actually are just kind of empty nodes. So that's an empty node right there. All it has is a name. It doesn't have, I guess it could have a custom class now. Maybe it always could, but we don't need it here in this particular case. So let's go take a look then at the property list, and you can see our event listeners. We've got a listener rock 1, so we're listening for the pairing of rock 4 to rock base 4, and then the events, as I just described, are move node to node, which is going to take our rock base 3 and move it to rock placeholder 3, and then the same thing is going to occur for rock 3, rock move node to node, rock base 2, and so on like that. And obviously we're going to do the same thing again and again until we finally get down to pairing rock 1 with rock base 1. And then when that happens, we're going to start a timer, and that's going to be timer 1. All right, so go over here to your event timers, and you can see you've got timer 1. The delay is going to be 4 seconds. Initially, this is not enabled, okay, so that's why we're starting it, because it's turned off. And then this timer is not repeating. There's no frequency between the repeats. All that's happening is we're going to wait 4 seconds, and then we're going to open the cover page, or it could be whatever the next page is that you wanted to go to. And that, I believe, is pretty much how it works. Let's take a look at some of the other settings, though, which I did mention. We've got pairing sensitivity is set to 2, so it is actually pretty sensitive. It's kind of hard to do this, and you could actually make harder and harder puzzles by, over time, changing the pairing sensitivity. 0 is really easy. You just kind of have to throw stuff together, and it's going to find its particular match. 3 is pretty hard. And then, let's see, I don't have in here remove physics body, but I did have that in my previous puzzle, so I'll show you what that looks like. Remove physics body on pairing. What I'll do is I'll just copy that into here, but I'll turn that off. So by default, it's off anyway. And then we do have a boundary on here with the multiplier on X. So it is the boundary is going to be double the screen size on the X axis. And then you do actually have to offset this a little bit to kind of position it a little bit better. So that just makes it so that, again, your rocks, when they are dynamic and they are affected by gravity, they're not just going to fall down to the bottom of the ocean. And if you're ever curious what that boundary looks like, of course, you can turn physics on, which I guess we'll just do real fast. I can show you. Although, come to think of it, in this particular scene, I don't think you do end up seeing that boundary. Oh, but at the very least, you'll be able to see the physics behind the rocks. So you do get somewhat of an idea here what they look like. And one kind of cool thing I thought was neat, and I think this would be great in any storybook, is just playing around with the Z depth of, the part that's actually telling your story, which is your text. And of course, I know not everyone's going to use this as a storyteller kit. You could just make tons of mini games, but I'm easily amused, and I think that is kind of a cool effect right there. And keep in mind too that you can put in here little hidden areas to you could put in here something where you click down on it, it opens up the keyboard, and you could write a little message on maybe that rock back there, and the next person who reads the book is going to be able to see it. Now, one thing that you did notice here is that you can actually move the rocks, since the rocks are moving, based on the panning gesture, they can kind of get scrambled up over here. And I really, really doubt what you just saw happen would happen on an actual device. The physics are always a bit compromised on the simulator, but I'm sure you're seeing that it actually ended up falling through the boundary. But again, I really, really doubt that that's going on the device. Although if you wanted a surefire way of being positive that no rocks are going to escape that thin little boundary, then what you could always do is you could take, you could actually just take another rock bottom over here. So you could copy and paste this and move it underneath this way. And because this actually has a mass to it, collision wise it's a more substantial object, whereas with the edge based boundaries around the scene, I mean, it's really easy. Like if you have an object that's following the user's touch, it's really easy for them to just kind of pull it down below that, but it becomes a lot harder for them to do that if you've got something with an actual mass to it. It is still possible, but that's only if you're following the touch. You could kind of really drag it down below there. But in terms of stuff sort of like randomly falling through edges, that's really not going to happen with a mass-based object. So anyway, that's how this particular scene works. And I would, if I could leave you with a little inspiration, I would say think about kind of reconstructing or deconstructing some illustrations that you've done. Things like bridges and things like that would be great. So what you could have is the user could actually kind of do the same thing that you did here. We have to construct something in a particular order, and then when that happens, you could trigger an event that sends anything running across the bridge, for example. And if they try to do that too early, for example, maybe there's a button that just says run, and if they haven't constructed the bridge, well, then the character is obviously just going to fall to the bottom of the bridge, and they can, you can detect particular collisions with each other. So, then you could reset the page when that happens. So there's all sorts of fun stuff you could do with this. But I'll leave you from here, and don't forget, you can get this kit at cartoonsmart.com.